I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight, we're going to start with a story about government transparency. We hear folks in government talk about transparency all the time, sometimes even patting themselves on the back for following it, and sometimes they do deserve that congratulations. But as I've been looking into the problems of Oregon registering people to vote who were not citizens, transparency seems to be more of a nice word than a guiding principle. And that makes it our big story tonight. First, let me begin by saying that I think Oregon's system of registering voters and conducting elections is amongst the best in the country. Don't believe the doomsday folks who'll try to convince you it's a system full of corruption and ripe for manipulation. It is not. But that doesn't mean that Oregon leaders get a pass when it comes to the principle of transparency, and that's what this report's about. There's more to the story of why the state worked so hard to sift through its voter rolls. The effort eventually turned up more than 1,200 people who were not citizens but had accidentally been registered to vote by the DMV and the Secretary of State. Only 9 actually voted. First, some background to make sure that we're all on the same page. Willamette Week's Nigel Jaquist broke the story back on September 13th that the DMV and the Secretary of State's office mistakenly put more than 300 non-citizens onto the voting rolls since 2021. How did the error happen? The DMV said it was a data entry error with clerks accidentally checking a computer tab that said a person had presented a U.S. passport or birth certificate to get a new license or ID when in fact they had not. They presented a foreign passport or birth certificate. Then comes today's bombshell. The DMV learned they had potential problems as many as 6 weeks before they even told the Secretary of State's office, which runs those elections. What was going on during those 6 weeks? Well, a spokesman writes, DMV spent the few weeks between 8/1 and 9/5 identifying the problem, how it could happen, what changes could prevent it from occurring, and how to review our records at scale. He went on, the systemic review of transactions began on 9/5. DMV communicated with the Secretary of State's office for the first time on this systemic issue on 9/12 when DMV had completed its initial review. I have to tell you, I think there is still a lot more to learn about this story. I have conflicting information on some of the key details. Much of it changed even in the last 90 minutes. So I filed an open records request with DMV to try to get to the bottom of all this. I'll let you know when I get the documents and what they have to say. In the meantime, what do you think? Are you concerned about Oregon's security with automatic voter registration, or do you think that things are going just fine? Is this a bunch about nothing? Let me know, will you? Our email address is there on your screen. It's thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. All right, let's talk about a criminal case playing out now in Tigard. It centers around a group of immigrants from Haiti. 2 women, a mother and a daughter, were arrested last week accused of trafficking immigrants from Haiti and using them as indentured servants. Yolandita Andre and her mother, Marie Valmont, were Haitian immigrants themselves. They came to the U.S. in 1999, but now the U.S. Attorney's Office for Oregon says last year they convinced 2 adults and a child to come to Tigard and work for them at their adult foster care home for long hours and little pay. The place is called Velidas. Our team talked to Andre. She frames it differently. She says that she and her mom sponsored her relatives from Haiti and tried to take care of them.
Their airplane tickets and everything, no one paid for anything. Everything came out of our own pockets. So we were going out of our way, we bought them clothes, bought them shoes. It was getting into winter time. They were cold because coming from the Caribbean, different temperature. So we paid for all of that.
But the 3 victims told investigators they had to work 16 to 17-hour days at the foster home, had to all sleep together in a living room, and got paid about $2 an hour. One victim told investigators they also had to be available all night for clients who needed 24-hour care. They also told investigators that Valmont and Andre took their immigration paperwork and threatened them with deportation and voodoo curses. Andre again characterized it differently when we talked with her.
We had a great relationship. They were doing things around the house, like cleaning the driveway, doing things like acts of service, which are like common in our culture. So my mom and I were thinking that it's coming out of like a place of, thankfulness.
She says they sent hundreds of dollars back to Haiti for their families and paid to get them CPR and dementia training and give them an allowance they could use until they got their work permits. But she says they were never considered employees.
They, like I said, they were like doing things around the house for us, like acts of service. And we're thinking, oh, they're just like being really nice. And then one day, Robinson says that for all the things that he's doing, he wants to be like compensated. He's like, I'm doing all these things and I'm not getting paid for it. And we're like, but I thought that you were just doing it like because you wanted to, because we never asked you to get up and to do anything. And he said, he's like, I didn't come here to just work and not be compensated. And we're like, but we never had an agreement with you. We never had a schedule with you, like an actual employee where you have to get up at a certain time, you get a break. They never had any of that.
But the attorney's office says DHS records show 3 victims listed as primary caregivers for the business, listed on a staffing plan with availability all 7 days of the week and listed on caregiver schedules as well. They say when they got a search warrant, they found the victims' immigration paperwork, a social security card, and an employee authorization document in the suspect's bedroom. Both have pleaded not guilty. If convicted, forced labor charges are punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison for each count. These women face 7 counts each. Now let's get to some of your thoughts on our big story from Friday, where we took a closer look at some of the new renderings of the I-5 project, the I-5 bridge between Portland and Vancouver. This is the first time that we're seeing real-world simulations, meaning the new bridge drawings are basically dropped into actual images. They featured both the double-decker fixed bridge design and the drawbridge option, since the final design has not yet been decided. If you missed our segment on Friday, you can find it anytime on the KGW YouTube channel. You should check it out. It's good. Just look for it in the story section. We got plenty of comments like this one from Jan, who wrote, "It's ugly. A whole lot of concrete and no artistry at all. Most bridges have something interesting to look at. Why is this one so bland?" Over on our YouTube video, a viewer wrote, "God, that concrete thing is horrific. Could they at least try to give it some beauty? Leave stuff like that in the last century." Oh my. And we thought this exchange in the YouTube comments was worth highlighting as well. One viewer wrote, "I've got to say, neither design is particularly attractive. How about a design people will want to look at for the next 100 years? And then someone else commented, "How about we build a bridge for movement of vehicles and not make it attractive? It is a freeway bridge and needs to avoid a drawbridge design." We also wanted to answer a question that came in from a viewer named Terry.
On your simulated views of the new Interstate bridge, the one thing I couldn't tell from any of the photos was which side of the existing bridge is it going to be on. Is it going to be on the upstream or east side or the downstream west side?
That, Terry, is an excellent question, and here's your answer. The new bridge will be on the west side of the old one, so downstream along the Columbia River. We turned this drawing on its side so the top points north to Vancouver. You can see the current bridges there on the right side, with the new ones planned to be built on the left or the west. As far as why it's being built to the west, well, today the bridge team told us, quote, "It better reduces impacts to historic and cultural resources and allows the program to maintain traffic on I-5 during construction of the replacement bridge." Moving on, 1 year after the death penalty was officially removed from the state law books in Washington state, the Department of Corrections there has officially closed a chapter on a dark history of capital punishment. The Washington Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional and racist a few years ago. And this month, the last death penalty chamber was taken offline at the state penitentiary in Walla Walla. Sharon Yu from our sister station in Seattle has the story.
Good morning, everyone. We're here for a special closure of the execution chamber at the penitentiary here.
The room where 78 inmates have been executed since 1904 is stuck in 2010. The clock points to 12:56 perpetually, the time the last inmate was killed by lethal injection. It will stay this way for the foreseeable future as the death penalty comes to a ceremonial end with an addition of this plaque. It bears a quote from Governor Jay Inslee, whose legacy now includes abolishing the death penalty in Washington state.
When I made this decision fairly early in my term as governor, It was not an easy decision. It weighed very heavily on me for many, many reasons. And I dedicated myself and my team to really understanding the ramifications of the death penalty in our state.
So how did we get to this point? From having an execution chamber that is open to the public to an active gallows, ultimately shutting it down was a journey that took years.
Over the decades, inmates sentenced to death got to choose, die by hanging or lethal injection in front of a gallery. But with the death penalty officially outlawed in Washington state, the death chamber, along with the gallows, is now offline.
I just think it's incredible.
Heather Evans is one of the authors of the report that convinced the Supreme Court in 2018 Washington state's capital punishment policy was racist. Evans is a University of Washington sociology professor, but back in 2016, she was co-author Catherine Beckett's graduate student.
Just thinking of how much time we all spent in Catherine's office.
Evans and Beckett combed through more than 2,000 capital case trial reports and came to this conclusion.
Race alone made a defendant who was black 4.5 times as likely to get the death penalty than a defendant who was not black.
The Supreme Court's opinion highlights specific examples of how race was weaponized inside Washington state courtrooms. It showed in some cases prosecutors worked to take the only black juror off the panel, and how a prosecutor used, quote, inflammatory, racially charged images to highlight a defendant's race, even when that had no relevance to the case. Evans says even with reading through those cases, she did not expect the final calculations to show such a stark disparity.
Very shocking. I mean, it was stunning. When I first got that result, I felt sick to my stomach.
Even after triple, quadruple checks, the numbers were clear. 2
defendants shared all of the same legal characteristics, and only their race was changed, that just by being black, you were 4.5 times more likely to get the death penalty.
The report highlights what civil rights attorney James Bible says he had known all along.
In this society, we rely on data, and data and research often make a lot of sense in terms of whether or not to move in a particular direction. There's also this gray area where some folks know that on occasion they don't have to be told that they're hitting in the face because they feel the blow.
Bible says, as an attorney, he has seen racism firsthand in the courtroom.
Impact that it has on people of color, specifically Black and Latino people in the state of Washington and around the country that have been disproportionately impacted by death penalty decisions. I think that what it means is some children will still have their fathers and their mothers, and moms and dads will still have their children.
As for Evans, the data scientist, she still finds the Supreme Court's unanimous decision surreal. Luckily, she has a daily reminder.
On my body, 9-0, to remind myself, again, I was so studying that we got the result that we did, but that it was unanimous and that it was our evidence that was used to reach that goal.
When the ultimate decision is death, there is too much at stake to accept an imperfect system.
The closing of the death chamber
Thank you for joining us.
Is ceremonial. But this plaque is evidence systemic change is possible.
But that is, I think, the natural instinct, is people want to identify the quote-unquote bad apples, the few bad apples, whereas the argument that we're making is this is a systemic problem. This is not 1 or 2 individuals who can simply be replaced. And when it's a systemic problem, rather than replacing people, you need to change the system.
That was Sharon Yu reporting. As far as what will happen next with the death chamber, it will be left alone and preserved for historical purposes. Coming up next on the story, the old Gordon's Fireplace building was supposed to hit the auction block today, but lo and behold, it did not. The reason why, plus we'll show you a few of the other properties that did go under the gavel today, and what happens if they do not get any bids. That's next when the story returns. We have an update for you now on the Northeast Portland eyesore, the old Gordon's Fireplace building. Look at it there. It was set to be auctioned off today, but that did not happen. Late last week, the bank, which now owns the property, paid off most of the liens the city filed against the building. That same bank sued multiple developers at the end of August for defaulting on their loans for the building and the site. The bank says they owe almost $5 million. The building was set for the auction block with several other abandoned homes in Portland that have become a burden on the neighborhoods across the city. They attract squatters, rat infestations, and other safety issues. Our Blair Best went to the auction today.
Sharon has lived next to this abandoned Southeast Portland home for a long time.
I've been here 43 years, and I've had to look at that for at least 10 years.
On Monday, you could not only see the years of neglect, but you could smell it too.
It's been a garbage dump for at least 3 years now.
And people used to be going over there and sleeping there.
And not to mention the rodents.
I mean, one year I killed over 100 rats.
The 87th Avenue property is one of 6 the city foreclosed on and auctioned off Monday afternoon.
Does anyone wish to bid?
Combined, the 6 property owners owe more than $1 million in unpaid fees for code violations and nuisance complaints, among other things.
These homes are there, vacant, becoming distressed. We have squatters going in, people vandalizing everywhere.
Only 2 of the 6 properties sold, including this one on North Detroit Avenue. The city foreclosed on it this past summer. On Monday, it sold for $200,000 after a lengthy bidding war.
That home is in great condition, and I think that it's also in a prime location.
Unlike the 87th Avenue property, which received no bids, leaving that neighborhood to keep living with its side effects.
It makes me extremely angry, and if I think about it too much, I'm just going to get really not very polite.
Blair joins me now from outside the Portland building where the auction took place. Blair, what happens to those homes that did not sell?
They go on the city's list for their next auction. Another list of vacant homes will be presented to City Council sometime next month. They'll have to approve that, and then another auction will happen in a few months after that. But in the meantime, for the neighbors living next to these vacant homes and dealing with everything that comes with it, they're encouraged to contact the city, fill out a form, and have someone come out and reassess the property. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like any immediate change, and unfortunately, there really is no immediate change for these properties that didn't sell today. Pat?
All right, Blair, and what about for the ones who did sell? What happens next with them?
So City Council recently changed rules around how soon a bidder can take ownership of their property. It used to be a year to allow time for the original owner to pay off any fines and sort of take back their property. But recently City Council decided that was too long, so they shortened it to 90 days. Here's that city spokesperson on why that matters.
They no longer are kind of at the will of whatever happens for the next year. So that was really a big deal, and I think that that's a huge part of why we saw such a big turnout today. We have so many properties that are in really interesting conditions. We have an aging population here in Portland, so we have a lot of folks that moved away from where they're from, came to Portland, built an amazing legacy and passed away and have no one to pass it on to. So we have a lot of vacant homes because no one was able to come forward and take over that estate. So these homes are there, vacant, becoming distressed. We have squatters going in, people vandalizing everywhere. So it's important for us to get those properties back into the hands of Portlanders to continue to develop it.
All right, so again, in 3 months, the owners of those 2 properties that sold today will be able to start renovating or tearing them down. Pat?
All right, thanks, Blair. Interesting as always. Coming up next on the story, whale watching is popular along our Pacific coast, but researchers at Oregon State are using new techniques and new tech to give us some glimpses into some surprising habits of our local gray whales. Acrobatics for a whale and much more, now captured on video when the story returns. Gray whales along the Pacific coast are putting on quite an acrobatic show. But until now, it's been nearly impossible to see it. Libby Dowsett shows us how Oregon State researchers are taking the term whale watching to new heights.
They flip, pull tight turns, blast bubbles, and do headstands. Who knew all this was going on right along the Pacific coast?
I was blown away the first time I saw our drone footage of a whale swimming upside down, doing jaw snapping while it, moved forward upside down, or doing a headstand and using its pectoral fins to hold its position. It's just not at all how we think about whales.
Researchers from OSU's Marine Mammal Institute are sharing these clips to demonstrate the unique ways this group of Pacific gray whales forages along Oregon's coast.
Most other whales feed so deep that you can't necessarily see what they're doing in detail. But these whales here off the coast of Newport are feeding water so shallow you can watch them most of the time.
Based on 7 years of drone footage, researchers Clara Bird and Lee Torres say the gray whales' age and size appear to affect how they position themselves during mealtime.
They really just bent in ways that I think before we didn't think whales would do. So they turn in tight circles and would literally go backwards, paddle backwards, and upside down, and all sorts of things.
As this Pacific Coast feeding group of about 200 whales spends time along the coast of Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and Southern Canada, rather than swimming to the Arctic with the other gray whales. That's why they were the perfect subjects to catch on a drone. Libby Dowsett, KGW News.
How cool is that? By the way, thanks for joining us. That's the end of our show. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. For those of you watching us online, we'll see you the next time, however you find us. For the rest of you watching live, Straight Talk with Laurel Porter's coming your way next. Super interesting show. Send us your questions, by the way, and your feedback following the vice presidential debate tomorrow night. And I'll see you right back here on Wednesday at 6:30. Good night.